Stephen Altair, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a blessing to be here, Derek. Really, really wonderful to be here with you and everybody listening.
Yes, I'm excited. I think we have been vaguely in touch for a couple of years because I was curious about dragons and you turned up. I was searching for people that knew about it and you turned up. So maybe we could talk about dragons at some point. But I thought in a way to introduce you, because you have such an interesting backstory and you've talked about it on other shows, and it's a fascinating story. I don't necessarily want to have you repeat your whole origin story, but I would love if there's any points along the way that feel like you might want to share where you experienced something magical or out of the ordinary that caused you to rethink your worldview and then how that sort of changed your trajectory.
That's a joy to speak on because, like Yogananda and Autobiography of Yogi, I've had very similar experiences from when I was just a young child. So I think if you're listening and you love to feel the opportunity of to touch those higher dimensions, Derek and I are going to take you there. So be prepared for a few surprises.
Yeah, so actually out just to share with you, there was just a couple of years ago, I was in Sedona, actually. I think, are you in Sedona?
I'm
Right.
in Sedona right now with Raquel Spring, who's a fourth generational astrologer. So yeah, we do a lot of retreats together.
Yeah. So there's a canyon that I'm trying to think. It's like the third you head out sort of west of town and it's like the third canyon in a row and it's like the deep ancient Vortex canyon. Like the others are
Yeah.
like great for day hikes and this one is like you can feel it's like a very ancient energy. And I was hiking with a group and I actually split off from the group and it was sunset and I was sort of like the only one on the trail because I wanted to try to get as high as possible up on the rim so I could see the view. And I met this Indian and this he's sort of an older gentleman and he was telling me, "Oh yeah, there's a great view. You can do this." And I ran into him a couple times on the trail. We were like leapfrogging each other on the trail. And so I went up, got my sunset view. It was beautiful. And I came down and this is a box canyon, right? So there's only one way in and one way out. So you would see everyone leaving the trail if because we finally made it back to the trailhead and I kept expecting him to because he was right behind me come back out. But then we got to the parking lot and there was no car left and he never came out of the trail and I realized that he wasn't real.
Yeah.
That he was a projection created by the canyon be created by a shaman and I was like whoa that person
Wow,
is
that is amazing.
not even real and that totally shifted my impression of what is possible in
Incredible.
reality. It was amazing.
Incredible. I love that. Well, since you've asked me to tap into stories that, I almost feel like we could share stories like this and just the most remarkable things would happen. So, quite a number of years ago, I was in New Zealand with my partner at the time, and we went to a glacier known as the Fox Glacier, and we were part of a group. And your story reminds me of the amazing things that can happen when you tap into higher dimensions, sometimes consciously, sometimes they're just there because of the nature of your soul connection. And we were walking with the group, and I'd been there many times, and I noticed a track or trail off to the right. And I said, and the guy that was running it was a of mine, and I just said, "Hey, do you mind if I just duck off here? Because I haven't seen this. I haven't been down this track before." He says, "Yeah, no worries. We'll just keep going." So I walked down the track with my partner and we come to a group of bushes and then a flat stop. Like behind those bushes was a cliff, a sheer
Mhm.
cliff face. So you can't go through it. And I said to her, I said, "Look, I feel like we're supposed to go under this little bit, even though that we could see there was this kind of cliff rock face just beyond." We pushed through, and the next moment we were in the most magical place. To this day, she still says this is the most magical thing that's ever happened to her. We were out in a completely different world. Like they call them Baal in the Tibetan worlds, or they call it hidden valleys. We
Mm.
literally came out into a place. So for those of you listening, imagine you suddenly you don't know, but you arrive at Disneyland, and Disneyland is a pure natural resource. So beautiful, sparkling waterfalls and trees that have got shining with golden light, and the most extraordinary verdant, rich green grass and forests that look like elven forests out of the Lord of the Rings. And we're standing there. And we're literally in this place. You know, to this day, I know, I swear, I could touch everything. I could sit in the grass. I could play in the waterfalls, in the streams. I could walk through the forest. And my partner at the time said she felt like a fairy in an enchanted land. She said to this day, she's never experienced anything like this. So it's helpful that there were two of us there. And we stayed there. I look, again, I'd, I'd say it had to have been at least half an hour. We had cameras and phones and all that sort of stuff. We tried to take photos, but none of the electronics would work. I had a watch on and it stopped.
Ah.
And so nothing would work. But we thought, well, at least we're here. We can, and we lay down and we played and so on and so forth. Then we came out of there after what I would imagine was half an hour. And I said to her the same thing, and she agreed, we better go back because we should show the group this. Oh my goodness, this is like a wonderland. It's like the most extraordinary thing we'd ever seen, ever. I mean, to this day, I can still remember the feeling. We emerge from those bushes, so we come through. Of course, there's no cliff there at this point, or at least not what we're walking through. We walk through the bushes and walk up the path, and I put a rock down on the path, and I call ahead to the guy, and I thought, that's strange, they've hardly moved from the spot they were in. And I call
Oh,
ahead to him and I say, hey, have you guys been up and back already? And he said, what do you mean? We saw you disappeared for only an instant. We just thought you'd just gone, come straight back. And I showed him his watch, of course, mine had stopped and his was, moving. So his had gone on that few minutes. So somewhere in that flash of the mystical realms, we'd been able to touch something beyond this world, and still to this day, we've never been able to re-experience it because we took actually the whole group. We said, we've got to show you this. I mean, they could see we had absolute awe written on every pore of our skin. And we went back to the point where I put the rock and I said, look, but I got there, no path, no rock, no nothing. And I asked her, I said, do you remember there was a track there that I went? He said, I vaguely, yeah. He said, you'd pointed out something or other to me. I just thought it was a rough beaten track. I said, it's not there. Nothing's there.
wow.
He said, Stephen, he said, weird things always happen to you. He said, I've been here before. That's never happened to anybody, but of course it's going to happen to you. And he questioned my partner. And of course, she gave a verbatim, identical description of everything, the length of time, the technology not working, all of that, that to really support what we'd both experienced. So when you spoke about that beautiful experience you had, I can feel that in my body. And I hope one of the things I hope to everybody listening that Derek and I are conveying what it feels like in our bodies for you to feel this with us too. Because it's actually transforming when you can hear a really deep and authentic experience that somebody has had. And these things are possible. So, if you write into Derek and you've had a mystical experience like this, I'd love you to send him floods of
Ooh,
emails and
yeah.
messages. Say, Derek, you wouldn't believe it. I've had something just like you.
Oh,
Or
amazing.
Stephen.
And where I actually probably still go is, trying to understand it rationally. Like, how was that was it like a pocket dimension? Was it, just was it actually there and the doorway opened up and I went under the mountain, like trying to rationally understand it. Did you go through any of that experience to try to make sense of it, or would you
Yeah,
just accept it
yes,
the way it
yes.
was?
I did, and here I'll tap into another story for you, and this also touches right on dragon consciousness. So I also work with two well-known quantum physicists. One is Stuart Hameroff in the US in Arizona, and their other is Kunio Yasue in Japan. And all of us are working on consciousness and let's call them higher levels of consciousness. Those are the words that they would use. Now, in their terms in quantum physics, the actual point in which that person appeared to you and that valley appeared to me and my partner at that time is already existing. And in a sense, everything is simultaneously existing. If you want to visualize, feel this as you're listening, imagine a whole stack of pancakes being all the dimensions, all the way from our dimensional existence through to fifth dimension, through to 12th and beyond, right? So you've got all those pancakes stacked up simultaneously. So the moment that you actually were able to connect to him and me to the valley, we're actually tapping into a higher level of what is currently coexisting, almost like parallel worlds, but that those coexisting levels of consciousness, for whatever reason, you elevated your consciousness, let's say to a fifth dimensional level, and just were instantly able to see and connect with beings that are real fifth dimensional beings and that are coexisting there with you right at that point. So in that sense, it's very real on a fifth dimensional level, and it would be the same with that Bale or Hidden Valley. For some reason, we were able to tap right into that fifth dimensional coexistence of a space that in fact is already there in that. And if you are able to connect to that higher level of consciousness, then you're able to walk through the portal, as it were. Now, so an interesting, life example of this was with him. As I mentioned, he's a friend of mine, and I've done a lot of research with him on his new research center called Dreams Come True in Japan, which is looking at what lies beyond, in terms of higher dimensions in quantum physics, what could you actually research? Now, he is aiming to build this center, and he took me to the space on a dragon portal. So he walked me in Japan to this place. And of course, dragons and portals are well known to, Chinese, Japanese, to the whole Asian perspective of how the universe operates. And hundreds of years ago, in this exact place where he took me, generations of Japanese royalty knew that this area had this opening to dragon consciousness. And so they built it, and it was kept secret. It was built in a very humble way so that people wouldn't think there was anything extraordinary about it. So he had identified this, and he said lots of craft and lots of other beings would actually gather around this point. And when he took me there, it was like I was actually standing on a vortex similar to in Sedona. I didn't feel anything at all walking up to it. And then suddenly when I was in the middle of the space, and it's right in the middle of this Tokyo, this top secret place, and at the moment it's just a car park, which is run or owned by a very wealthy multimillionaire who lives in this humble little tiny cottage right next to the dragon portal because he knows the lineages that have held that dragon space for so many years. And when I went there, it was like, whoa, it was like actually literally being uplifted because I've done a lot of research with different scientists, including Zenka Caro, who runs LightNet in Sedona, into going and experiencing different vortexes that have been revealed by scientists as having these, let's call them higher dimensional frequencies. So it was exactly the same in Japan. And he got extremely excited about the fact that in some way or another, this was going to be the site of his research center, Dreams Come True. And he's completely tapped into that dragon consciousness as being crucial for the unfolding of higher dimensional research facilities. And there's a lot in, as I studied in Japan, when I first came out of university, I had a vision that led me to Japan. And I went and studied in a monastery, a Zen monastery in Shikoku. And I was meditating one day there, but, being hit from time to time by a very stiff rod by the abbot, doing that traditional Zen meditation. And I had this dream right in the middle of this, very isolated, solitary retreat I was doing of a famous Japanese founder called Kukai. And so I told the abbot through a translator, and he said, just a moment. So he gets on the phone. I didn't know what he was doing. And then he speaks to the translator, and the translator said, oh, it appears you're in the wrong monastery. We've arranged for you to transfer to the Shingon monastery. That's where I ended up, is then go, like literally, it was like, wow, this is fantastic. I am literally being supported by the universe and dreams and those higher order or higher dimensional faculties that we all have abilities to use. So any of you that want to touch dragon consciousness or want to touch those higher dimensions, I really encourage you to use the faculty of dreaming, which I've done a lot of both research. I've been researched. The interesting thing, Derek, is that people often, when they get me on the interviews, they say, oh, yeah, but, is this real? Like you said, is this real? How do you verify it? I've had my brain researched by Dentsu Science Lab in Japan, and they did some studies on me, and they put some graphs down beside me and said, do you take DMT? Do you do you do LSD? And I said, no. And they said, well, these are actually participants in studies we've done that do LSD and Aya and Grandma Aya and DMT. And they said, your brain looks like it's on DMT 24/7. Then they asked me, could I go into a longitudinal study, measuring my brain and its activity against meditators who were doing similar things to what I was doing, which I agreed to. They then published that study in science and technology journals. And that's how I got to speak with Deepak Chopra and Thomas Hubel and Dawson Church and many other luminaries of the space at the time, purely through that beautiful scientific evidence.
Mm,
So, yeah, we've got a
yeah.
lot of stories to share that are very helpful.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we've had Dawson Church on the show. He's wonderful. He's like one of my favorite laughs of all time.
He
He's
is
always
great.
always laughing.
I love
And
it.
your story about your brain being steady reminds me, my collaborator, Dita Young, she is known as Europe's sort of leading animal communicator. She works with a lot of the Olympic jumping horses of Denmark, and she'll be called, like if a zoo somewhere in Europe has a problem animal, like the elephants are fighting, they'll call her and she'll help them sort it out. And so her brain has been studied to watch her do telepathy with animals in real time to see what's going on. So I think that's pretty exciting that people are willing
Wow.
to, put their research funding towards that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Because I know you're a path yourself, and I know she is as well. I'll give you a curious animal story. I have a really strong connection with dolphins and snakes, just though those, for whatever reason, that kind of telepathic connection. And some years ago in Japan, I was walking down a path with some villagers from the area that I was with, and I was asking, I just happened to be talking about snakes, and I said, are there snakes around this area? And they said, yeah, but they're a particular kind. There's some are poisonous, some are not. And I said, do you have any white snakes? And they said, oh no, no, not there's no those are very unusual. They only occur in a particular part of Japan, but not here. About a few minutes as we're walking along, a beautiful female white snake comes across the path in front of us. We all saw it. They saw it too. They stopped in astonishment because, of course, we're actually in the middle of this conversation about snakes. Walked right up to that snake because I could hear it, because I can speak that. I've had lots of experiences with snakes over the years.
Mm.
And I just knelt down in front of her and she turned her head. Like she actually stopped in the path, turned her head, looked straight at me. I just knelt down. I just said a few beautiful prayers and exchanged some thoughts. And then she went across the path and disappeared. Now, the people I was with, there was an instant clamor because they said, were you speaking to that snake? And there's no possibility. There are no white snakes in this area. These were people that had lived in the area for, 40, 50, 60 years and had never, ever, ever seen a white snake. So I've had a lot of those kinds of experiences with snakes. Same with dolphins. A group of friends years ago asked me, could I communicate? And I said, yeah, we all can. Everybody listening can communicate, especially if you bring a focus of that. And they said, well, can you prove it to us? Now, I was 20 and my kind of very like, okay, I can do anything phase. I said, sure, what would work? And they said, why don't you call a pod of dolphins? So I sat down on the beach with them and I said, just give me a few minutes silence. I spent about 5 minutes and I dropped into that space of vast emptiness where the infinite field of miracles and possibilities lies. And in that instant, Derek, just for a split second, I literally felt the ocean and the dolphins like course through me oh, it was amazing. I can still feel it now. It makes my hair stand on. And at that moment, my friend started yelling because there was a pod of about 300 dolphins. This was
Whoa.
in Kaikoura in New Zealand, swimming along on the horizon. Three of those dolphins turned, split off the pod, like right opposite us. Just imagine you're on a wild beach that stretches for miles. Nobody else is there. And we're just at this one point on the beach, and these three dolphins out at sea split off from the pod and actually swim directly, like a beeline for where I was sitting. And so I said to my friends, hey, are you going in? They said, no, 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 we're too scared because it was a wild ocean beach, not the sort of food for delicate swimmers. So I swim well, so I couldn't wait. So I dived in, those three dolphins, Derek, swam around me for about 20 minutes, talking and chattering. They allowed me to swim, allowed me to, these are wild dolphins. It was just
Wow.
so magical. So those are, speaking to animal telepathy, I absolutely just vibe with that so deeply. I adore animals. But a few years ago when I was at a powwow in the US, and one of the shamans said to me, because I'm Hawaiian, Maori, Jamaican by my roots, so I've got a lot of deep indigenous roots in there. And he said, would you, have you ever done your totem? Like to see what comes out. And he had a bag of runes, yeah, runes that would tell him what my totem was. I said, "Do you see it?" So, yeah, he said, "Wow." He said, "You have a very strong connection to that hummingbird." He said, "Let's try again." Puts his back, shakes it again. As he's pulling out the rune through the flap of the teepee or the tent, a hummingbird flies in, flies around us, and flies out again. And then he pulls the rune and it's the hummingbird again. So for many years, I just adored those little hummingbirds and think, wow, they really look after me. They bring a lot of joy. I'd be interested what they could write more messages to you and tell you what their totem animal is, because I think
Hmm.
then we're on, and what sort of telepathic communication they have. So if you're listening and you have a telepathy with horses or dogs or
Hmm.
hummingbirds, please let us know, because it's such a rich and powerful conversation as we all move into supporting Gaia in her consciousness to ascend.
One thing that we do in our family, and it's December, so we're going to be doing this soon, is at the beginning of each year, we pick an animal medicine card from the animal medicine deck that's going to be our guide for the upcoming year. And we sort of get to know that animal and how it operates. And, for example, my animal this year was turkey. And one of the major lessons was teaching me about generosity, because the turkey is just like sort of giving of its whole being. And it's taught me when I get to those decision points where I could like be more generous or I could be more conservative, right, with either my energy or my finances or something, that to try to default to being more generous, to get out of my comfort zone in a way in terms of like how I can be generous. And it's been quite the interesting experience to walk with the turkey this year in that manner. And I had never really considered the turkey that much before.
Wow. I love that. I love that. The power to be generous with your words is such a incredible opportunity. I work with lots of, you'd call them the ultra high net worth families and individuals of this planet. And one of the things I always encourage people to do is to speak at least one generous word to your partner, to actually physically say it, not just think it, but to say, darling, I truly appreciate whatever it is. Now, for some people, they're not used to expressing appreciation out loud, but that speaks to that turkey power. It actually brings the energy of the turkey right present, so that you actually commit to getting up and saying one deeply appreciative, grateful phrase to somebody
Hmm.
out loud. And I've worked with a lot of people on this, and it is amazing how much it changes the energy. So for example, I might be with a group of people, families. So part of, what I do, I'm a well-being head for a company called Geneticare based in Hong Kong, and they look after a lot of these families. So one of the things I often do when I bring the family together is to speak first of all from that space of gratitude. Because quite often when we have challenges in life, and this is, when I give talks on from chaos to clarity, I often talk to what I call the going to the dentist phase. And you can do this with anybody in your life, and it works a real charm. You all you need to do is get commitment and agreement from somebody. So it could be your partner. So let's say you're trying to work through a problem with them, and it could be a real sticky problem, a relationship issue, a financial issue, something one of you is facing in terms of health or career decisions, a friend that one person likes and the other person doesn't. I'm really grateful for that. Three pieces of gratitude each is a real works magic, because then you're kind of deep into gratitude. Then the next part is the filling. So when you go to the dentist, nobody likes a root canal. Then they prefer a crown. and they're kind of okay with the filling, but it still hurts a bit. So the filling part in this analogy, and you speak to how you solve that problem successfully. So that then helps you to feel from gratitude into how gratitude supports solving problems. So it's such an easy thing to do. And you're not trying to solve your current problem, which is what most people do. They jump in feet first and, all sorts of conflict arises, but you just simply speaking to the way that you might have solved problems in the past successfully. Then once you've done that, the third part is the root canal. Now, nobody likes a root canal, and whatever problem you're having, if you're listening to this, it's probably difficult for you to resolve. So what you try to do with your partner is you don't try to fix it, because that's what we mostly try and do. All you do at this stage is you name the problem. So it could be, hey, I've got this friend, they're really dear to me, but you don't like them. And you talk about that problem. So one partner talks all the way through the problem, and the other partner just agrees to listen, not interrupt. That's a real key. Don't interrupt this part. And then the other person who's got the best friend that's causing so many problems, they just simply reflect back what they've heard. Then at that point, don't try to fix it. Then go out, because at the moment you're still at the dentist, but you need a bit of a rest because it's been a long, long day. You join hands and you just agree to go out for a 5 or 10 minute walk with no words. You don't try to sort anything out. You don't try to fix anything. You agree that if you're going to talk about anything, you talk about something neutral. Movie you both like, a piece of music that's kind of really vibes with you, or don't talk about it. Just a bit of silence. Then when you come back, you do the last part of this. You get some nice colored pencils and some drawing paper, and you both sit down and you draw the solution to whatever you both. It drops you into that whole creative side, and you're not speaking at that point, you're just drawing, and you're using this powerful possibility that we have inside our creative genius to actually reach into the unknown and actually do something in a way you've probably never dreamed of before. And that then, when I've done this process with, I've done it with very famous families who have had huge, and I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars of worth of issues to solve, and they've had the most extraordinary results. Some of them always, call me up and want to fly me up to solve their next problem because they said, Stephen, I don't know how you do it, but when we're in the room with you, we're all calm and we have these completely new ways of solving our problems. So I was thinking, I wonder if I could get in the room with Trump and Putin and Zelensky and just sit down and give them a possibility. I've always thought that the best way to solve a really, really dramatic situation could be you go out into the desert and everybody strips naked because then you're raw. Then you can't hide behind, a cap or nice suit. You're just in your bare essentials, your birthday suit, your basic Gaia consciousness. And then you find all sorts of different ways of solving it without anybody needing to come to a solution. But you're just actually working out how everybody creates and how you might co-create the most peace and the most love for this planet. So it'd be, yeah, if they ever want to invite me one time, I'd be quite keen to do it.
Oh man, I would love to see that. Yeah, and gosh, maybe we do a follow up or something around that. I've had some of these pieces that I've done, right? Like using gratitude as a lever to change your state, or right, listening to the point where you can completely recapitulate what they've said, and they say, "Yeah, you've totally understood me." Those are sort of very helpful tools. They have been in my relationship, right? When the person is like, yeah, you get everything that I'm saying. Like that's actually a really key point. But the walk and the pause and the drawing, that takes it to a whole nother level to
Yeah.
actually help the solution emerge. That's
Oh,
fantastic.
you're so right. I was with a really well-known family on this, and when they did the drawing part, the thing that touched me so deeply, because some of them had tears in their eyes, I didn't even know you felt like that or thought like that. Because what the drawing does, some people draw stick figures, some will do elaborate drawings, some it'll be more like a spiral galaxy with lots of outcomes around it. Some it's very linear, and it allows you to see right into the of where somebody's coming from. So you're not making a judgment about it. You're actually learning to feel into the other person's consciousness and what they're holding. And that was the aha for that group. they had never ever seen that side. And for a lot of people, it is entirely new because they just haven't thought about it in that way, and they've never come into, designing solutions from a higher level of consciousness or a different brain. So many people are used to solving it from a very left brain. Okay, we do this process. Let's argue about it. Let's fight. And it's all about detail. People get so bogged down in the of a company, or they're trying to solve a friendship that hasn't worked. And they'll come at it from the details. Hey, the friendship doesn't work because of one, two, three, or the company merger will never work because of one, two, three. It's the same thing. And they're only looking at it from that very left brain. Well, those three things say it can't work. But what if there was another solution entirely? And what if you could elevate your consciousness into those higher dimensions and actually solve your problems from there? So it puts a whole different outlook on it.
Yeah, it's that classic thing like, oh my gosh, I have this great idea for we could go on this big trip and I'm imagining this really cool adventure we could go on as a family. But yeah, what are we going to eat for lunch? Well, we could pack apples and then it's like now we're did back down into logistics and all of a sudden you're telling me like, well, we haven't gone grocery shopping like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like we've just moved from like what this amazing day trip could be
Yeah.
to arguing over these details. It's like we just totally switched energies around what's happening here.
You are so right. That obsession with details, and I mean all of us do this at some point or another. I mean, it really can drive, like you say, an adventure trip into suddenly all trying to get all the details sorted, and suddenly, there's one unhappy camper, or there's a whole family which originally was so tuned in that now it's kind of got all these little obstacles that are placed. Yeah, so I agree with you. The adventure is I often call myself a nomadic wizard because, and I think you're an adventurer wizard yourself. I went
Yes.
for in Sedona. I went to a very well-known aura reader, and she took the photo and did the camera. And she said, she said, you've got a nomadic wizard's aura. She said, no matter who tries to tie you down in life, it'll never work. You're always going to be traveling the world and touching people and opening consciousness like you do. I mean, we can do it. We've got the advantage of doing this virtually, and there's something about also doing this in the physical with people that sometimes is quite shocking and surprising because different things can happen in the physical where you're in a different place and suddenly an adventure opens that you've never considered. So I've struck that, a lot of times. Some of the beautiful adventures that I've had in life speak exactly to this. So I'll give you an example of how being in a physical place can actually change everything. So some years ago, I was in India, and India to me is a very magical place. Some people find India, tough. Sometimes the hygiene's not the best. Sometimes the water really tips people upside down, literally. And I myself got sick right at the end of a trip. I was so happy that I got through the whole, whatever, 3 months of travel that I did actually drink the water at the end. And yeah, I paid for it. I was not a happy chappy. So I was living at that stage in the Krishnamurti Foundation. I was actually living in Krishnamurti's house. Now, if I'd just done, virtual or online kind of sharing with them, I would have had an experience of, the person that was running the foundation and everything else at that stage. But I chose to actually go there physically, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And when I arrived, the very moment this is an example of how funny things can happen. The moment I arrived, there's a woman sitting there. She's got tears and she looks at me, and I could see she was, maybe she was from the States. I didn't know, but she was actually from Canada. And she said, "Oh, what brings you here?" And I said, I'm really interested in the Krishnamurti Foundation. So I was just coming to speak to the, not the founder, but the director of. And she said, "Do you by any chance have any background in education?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And she said, "Look, my mum, I could tell she was upset. My mum's been taken ill. They've given her, a couple of days at most. I need to get on a plane in just a few hours. And I looked after all English drama music here. Do you have any experience in that area?" Now, it just so happened that I did. So she said, would you like to look after the position for me? And she said, it's not much, it's just a few hours each day. She said, it's mostly happy kids that you could, she said, I can give you everything. But they're actually trying to find a replacement for me right now. So she took me into the office, and the director, interviewed me in about 3 minutes and said, "We're desperate. We'd love to have you." And that was it. And they put me up in Krishnamurti's house. So first of all, if I hadn't been in that physical place, I know that that wouldn't have happened. But
Mhm.
equally, then I was in Krishnamurti's house, and the energy of being in his house, because he's a famous philosopher and teacher, and he had a lot of great followers, and being in the energy of his house with his, so he allowed me to, because he was away at the time, he allowed me to look after his place and hang out with the gardener and his servants and all the rest of it. And so that completely changed my consciousness, because I was now not just virtually in a space, but I was physically in a space which was really, really, really open to that kind of flow of consciousness that he embodied. And so one night at 2 a.m. in the morning, and Derek, this is going to sound very mysterious to anybody who's listening to this, but it goes right back to the experience you had at Sedona with that higher dimensional being, with that indigenous elder. So 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a bang on the door, on Krishnamurti's door, and I thought, and it was a stormy night, it was raining heavily, and I thought, I wonder who would be that. So I just waited, because usually the servants who'd become like my family by then. It was rather awkward for me to have servants, but anyway, I was paying for their upkeep, for their income and so on. So I figured, okay, we're kind of doing each other a service in that way. I waited and nobody answered. So I got up, I opened the door. It's, just imagine it's pelting down with the heaviest rain. And there's a woman there standing in white, no umbrella, and not a drop of rain on her. So I thought, that's rather odd. And she said, and again, this is the physical circumstances, she said, I'm an emissary of Lord Krishna. I've come here to give you this ancient scroll. You spoke about turkeys. She said, you, meaning me, you're blessed by Saraswati and the peacocks. So I want you to have this ancient scroll. Keep it with you. You were a 16th century Raj. You had three relationships. In those three relationships, she said, you're going to meet these three people again, and you're like, so this was actually accurate. I met exactly the three people that she described. She
Hmm.
said, you'll meet three women. One will be, she said you'll recognize it. And she described their features, their career paths, all of that. Like one being a dancer, one being a singer, one being creative, all of this sort of thing. And she said and she described lots of my karma, lots of my past. I mean, it was just standing there at 2 o'clock in the morning with a woman who's untouched by rain is like one of these, again, out of the world experiences like yours. Then she says, here you go. That's all the message I've come to give you. She walks out in the rain without an umbrella, not a single drop fell on her clothes, and she disappeared. Well, she disappeared into the storm because it was pretty heavy rain. I went and woke the servants. Everybody was, a fluster at this kind of dramatic circumstance. They kept saying, "Oh, you're blessed by Krishna. You must be," because I had the scroll, which I've still got
Oh,
today
wow.
in New Zealand. Yeah, I still have that physical scroll. So I left it with my sister in New Zealand when I came and started traveling. And that scroll has chapter 12, verse 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, which just says, if you love the Lord with all your soul, you'll be filled with bliss and always protected. And at the top, it had a picture of Saraswati with all the peacocks. And it's just, extraordinary that that would happen at that time in those physical circumstances out of the blue. We asked the security guard for any footage from the camera, from anything. Number one, he had to be there all night. He hadn't seen anybody enter or leave. And when we checked there was no footage, there's nothing. There was no record of her ever entering or leaving, but I had that scroll. I mean, that scroll was like magic. A little bit like when I went to that hidden valley, I was with somebody who could at least verify all the things that I'd seen.
Yeah, you had actual physical artifact evidence of that. And did it become like did you do anything with the scroll after the fact? Like is it like a magical item that you can use for anything?
Yeah, but that's so interesting you asked that, because and this kind of speaks to Yogananda's own experiences. Any of you that have read Yogananda's books will know that he received a magical talisman or an amulet at a very young age, which he kept for a while and then it vanished. So I've had that same experience, not with the scroll, but I'll tell you one other one of many mystical experiences I had. So with the scroll, I kept it when you said, did I use it? Look, I showed it to people all over India as I traveled. And I think it served its what it made people question. Even today, I tell that story to any Hindu devotee, to body on the path of Krishna, and it's almost like I've lit up their life with something physical. The fact that I've got something physical that I could show them, especially in the past, was like, they wanted to touch it. And if that gave them more power in their own beliefs, then I've done something good. Not so much in the scroll itself, but in the actual power of
Mm.
that object to raise their consciousness into deeper and deeper levels of belief or faith or confidence. So what happened a number of years after that was, and this speaks to the power of objects, just like you said. So this is maybe also a better example of how the object can be used. Is some years later, I was walking down the street again with a person that I'd come to Australia in this case with, and we were both singing. We were like traveling minstrels, and it was a lovely kind of experience to have for a few years. And as I'm walking down the street in Mossman near Balmoral Beach in Australia, so the reason I'm saying that to everybody listening is these things can have. You don't have to be in the middle of India in Krishnamurti's house. This could be in the middle of your street where you'd never expect it to happen. And so I met this woman, and she just stops me right in the path and she said, "You're a monk. Sai Baba has told me I've got to see you. Come to my house at 5 o'clock." And she gives me this card. That's it. And then she leaves. I called after, "Okay, I'll see you there." So I was with a woman who was a very dear friend of mine and a very, very good singer. I said, "Should we go?" She said, "Yeah, yeah, let's go have a look." 5 o'clock, we go around to the house. She takes us down to the basement and she said, "Sai Baba delivered these to me," and they delivered them. Though one was a statue of Ganesh, about, a solid statue, maybe close to 4 foot high, 4 foot, maybe even closer to 5 foot high. And next to that was another statue of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion, also about the same height. And they're both in, traditional postures. And she said, "I got this message from Sai Baba this morning to come and find you, and that if you pray in front of these, a miracle will happen." And I said, "Well, okay, I don't know about that, but I got nothing to lose. I'd be happy to pray." Yeah, she said, "Just do whatever comes naturally." So I stand in front of Ganesha, and I didn't actually do anything in front of Ganesha, but it started. Ganesha has a trunk because Ganesha is an elephant, the elephant like the god of good fortune, and the out of the trunk starts to spurt this liquid like amrita, like honey. It came out of no. I could tip the statue over because it wasn't too heavy, but there was no source. There was nothing plugged in. There was nothing underneath. There were no switches. No. It was just a statue with now some fluid. So she went and got a bucket, and the fluid starts dripping out. And she says, "Taste it." So I taste it, and it's the most beautiful honey-like substance. I don't know. To this day, I've never tasted anything like it. That if you know what Amrita is, like it's supposed to be the immortal nectar of the gods, it was exactly that. I was amazing. So I felt, of course, very, very good. And then she said, "Pray in front of the other one and see what happens." So I knelt down in front of the statue of Kuan Yin, and the only thing, Derek, that I could think about was just to pray for the liberation, the freedom of all souls on this planet. So I just did that. And then the woman that I was traveling with and the woman whose house it was both give a little squeak or a squeal or a shriek because I opened my eyes, and out of the heart of the statue of Kuan Yin, it break. It was a bronze statue. Again, I could tip it on its side, nothing I could see inside, outside, roundabout side. But there's a break in the heart of the statue, like almost like a hole starting to appear. And out of it came this beautiful, about, close to nearly an inch sized pearl, a mother and baby pearl. So two pearls fused, a bigger pearl, which is the mother pearl, and a smaller pearl, which is the baby pearl. And the woman said, catch it, catch it." So it came out on a strand of silk, like literally out on this beautiful strand of silk from the heart, and the pearl was right at the end of it. So I put my hands out, and the pearl when it was too heavy for the strand of silk to carry, it dropped into my hands. And the woman said, "See, I told you were a monk. I knew you were the right person." And she bound it up for me and put it around my neck. And she said, "Look, it's a gift from God. It's a gift from Sai Baba. Please take it." And so I did. And I'm walking up the road again, and I pass this guy who I knew, a fellow named Malcolm, or I'll call him Malcolm. And he had a jeweler's in those days in Mossman. And he said, "What's that around your neck?" And I said, "It's a pearl." And he said, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, "Out of the heart of a statue." And he said, "No, no, where did you get it? I'm serious." No, I said, "I'm serious too, out of the heart of a statue, a Kuan Yin statue just now." He said, "Hey, can I take it and have I mean, can you come with me?" And I take it and have a look. Yeah, I said, "Of course." Goes into his store, he brings out all his instruments, and he said, "This is the most amazing pearl I've ever seen in my life." He said, "I'll give you 1,000 US." I said, "I'm not selling this." He said, "I'll give you 10,000 US now, cash." I said, "I'm not selling it to anybody. If you offered me $1 million, I'd still never sell it. I got no interest in selling this kind of thing. This is not mine to sell because I don't own it." I said, "Kuan Yin actually owns it. It's her compassion in the form of a rare pearl that's been gifted to me for other people." And so when you asked about, did I use the object? So that particular object I used for that pearl, I used for about 10 years for lots of healing, and people touched it and had these amazing experiences with it. And then when my mum was about to pass, I gave it to her. And when she passed, it vanished. It disappeared completely. I've never ever seen that. A little bit like Yogananda's story.
Hmm.
We all searched. We didn't know where it was, what has happened to it. So it went back to the owner, I think. It went back to Kuan Yin. It's probably nestling very securely in her heart. And I had a vision of a few years later after that where she held out the pearl to me. I was in a very deep, I was like a lucid dream, and I was deep, deep asleep at night. And then suddenly I had this very clear vision, and she held out the pearl, the exact same pearl. And she said, "Thank you for gifting this back to me. It will always reside in your heart. You don't need to use that for healing anymore." And she was right. I didn't need to use it for healing. I've got lots of these amazing experiences with healing that used to happen extremely spontaneously. So to those of you that are healers, because I know many of your audience come from such different and varied and rich walks of life, I've always found that, let me say that getting out of the way of the healing itself, because I'm not a healer, I just simply act as a receptacle for the healing energies of the light or God and Goddess or Father, Mother, God, or however you want to, in your own words, however you want to phrase that. And a really good example of that happened when I was in California, and I was traveling through, and it first started actually when I worked in astrological circles. So I was part of Yogananda's community. I used to do lots of singing there and playing. Then I decided, I'll study Sri Yukteswar's Vedic astrology. So I studied his beautiful work on the stars. And I was at a lovely person's house called Joey, and who was a yoga teacher in those days, up in Vancouver Beach, Vancouver Island, Vancouver Island, Qualicum Beach. And she knew I'd done lots of help, with couples and counseling, and I love doing work with couples. And I was at this party, and she said, "Would you help a couple? I know that you do astrology. I know you're also a counselor, and would you help them out?" And I hadn't really done a lot of in-depth work for anybody. And I said, "Yeah, sure, sure." When? She said, "Well, look, they're about to get divorced tomorrow, and they just want to see if they can make the divorce a little gentler." And I'd told them what a nice fellow you are. And so if you could help them in about 10 minutes. And I said, "Oh, oh." So she gave me a little room to sit in. And then I did this reading for them. And they cried 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 and they cried. And at the end of it, they didn't say anything. They just left. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know whether it'd be good, whether it hadn't been good, I mean, they were in tears still. The next morning, I get a knock on my door at 6 o'clock, and it's Joey, and she says, "Hey, Stephen, you better wake up. There's somebody at the door for you." And I don't know anybody here. She said, "Just go and answer it." I go to the door, Derek. I open the door, and out the door and down the street and round the corner, there's like 60 people lined up to come and have a reading. because that couple, I found out they didn't get divorced at all. They actually got remarried. They did a spiritual marriage to retake their vow. You're going to make me cry because I actually remember the feeling of that couple, and I was so moved that I think that set in motion all this natural, beautiful, love power that we have as human beings for each other in whatever way, whether it's formal relationship, whether it's not, whether it's friendship, just the way that we can bring love to people. So that I went from city to city, basically like that. I'd work for 2 weeks, nonstop. I'd work from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, and then I'd take a rest and go somewhere where nobody knew me. So the spontaneous healing that I was going to tell you about, which I always remember because it's such a simple event, but it was so moving at the time, was I was in Ashland, Oregon, and let's say I'll call him Al, call me Al.
Wait, can I pause you just a
Yeah.
second? We're moving really from story to story here.
Yes,
And
yes,
I,
fast.
in that time, you gave this couple a session and then they were going to get divorced the next day, but instead they got remarried the next day.
Yep, yep, yep.
And then they told 60 people and they all lined up outside. Like, how did that all happen?
So fast. So they went at the party, there were a lot of people. That was actually the trick. The couple, I'm imagining, because Joey didn't tell me how that happened so fast either, but it really was amazing. That couple went out of the room because I just stayed in the room. I was sort of quite overwhelmed myself because it was the first time I'd actually really worked with anybody in an official capacity as a Vedic astrologer or as a counselor with astrology and those sort of energies. And that couple, I'm assuming, must have gone out of the room, and everybody in the party of, there might have been 20, no, probably 30 people at that party. Everybody knew them. I didn't know anybody at the party. I only knew Joey, but everybody knew them, and that must have gone around the party, and they must have told some of their friends. So that first thing in the morning, and Joey, Joey was one of those wonderfully clever, magical beings that whatever she did with a lightness and a delight. So she probably said, he doesn't know anything, but if you come and see if you can get a booking with him tomorrow morning, let's see what we can arrange. She was that kind of friend where she knew that she could really, help me because I had no idea at that stage. I was actually I was building a boat at that time for a friend of mine, a well-known author of a book called Mind Power, called John Kehoe. And I've written a lot of books. I've written 10 books. I've published music albums. I've done all that sort of thing. So she knew that I had no idea what I was actually doing at that point, and I was just happy to let the winds,
Mhm.
drive the change, which is sometimes a really fantastic way to approach life. So she knew that, and I think she thought in Joey's very, amicable and very well-meaning way, she thought, if they've had that sort of result, I can help others. And she was really good at spreading the word. So I think that party must have
Mhm.
had 20 or 30 people who got touched in the same way as I got touched by. I'm still touched today. You can
Yeah.
tell. It was such a moving experience for me. It was like, God and Goddess set up a perfect scenario, do you know, Derek, I never charged for any of those sessions. I did what in Maori terms is called koha, or where you just simply offer people a gift of love and they offer a gift of love back. So I said, you don't need to pay, you can do whatever you want. So people gave me people gave me rare paintings, pieces of furniture, cars, tickets to places I'd never dreamed of, food, restaurant vouchers, just anything. And it was incredible. I literally started to, when people knew that, there was no end of people who wanted to come. And I always think that the collective consciousness is so much more powerful. I don't attribute to this anything to me individually. I think even, all your listeners right now are listening to these stories and hopefully saying, I can do this too, especially if you start to focus on what the positive outcomes you want are and start to energize those outcomes with simple affirmations or where you walk in a particular way. I'll tell you about that in a minute, which is a really funny thing to do. And what actually happens for a community, and I found this out with Qualicum Beach and Vancouver Island, is once the word goes around that something's happening, then the whole community, in a positive way, gets really involved, and they subtly they raise their dimensions of consciousness to higher dimensions of possibility, and they're all tapped into it. So I became kind of inadvertently like the genie's lamp, right? Not the genie, but just the lamp. So that if people came and kind of rubbed me a little bit, which was just to come and see me, and I got to the point of saying I basically wasn't doing astrology at all. I was just saying, what do you want? What do you wish for? And they would say, I remember one woman said, oh, I just want my business to increase. At the moment it's going down. And I said, okay, why don't you do this, and this? Just those three things. I'd always give people really simple, practical tips. I'd just look at a chart for about 2 minutes and say, oh, well, look, right at this moment, you've got a transit of, Pluto and the sun. So you just need to do this and do these three things and do them in the morning and at night. And that's all. And then I said, in 3 days, come back to me and let me know how you go. And I remember her in particular, she had this business, it was a clothing business. She hadn't managed to do, she did the three things that I'd suggested. And within 2 weeks, her business did a complete turnaround and doubled its turnover. And she
Hmm.
was just astonished. And so, over the years, I've had lots of good mentors. Like two of my personal mentors were the authors of Soup for the Soul. So that's Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Candler. And I went for breakfast with them one day. And they said, Stephen, the key to our success is this. Whatever you decide you want to do, three things every day to progress it, even if it's baby steps. So whatever it is you want to do in life, if you're listening, that piece of advice I've followed every single day of my life. It was what actually led to a bestseller. I had a bestseller in Australia. I got in the top 10, sold over 100,000 copies. It was a real
Hmm.
beautiful gift from the universe. So, and that was purely through their help and a publicist who was brilliant and lots of support of people in Sydney in those
Hmm.
days. So all of those opportunities to tap into our infinite potential are always there. And when you bring your consciousness to that and you really apply yourself and you simply develop the level of confidence that allows you to do three tiny baby steps every day, you watch the way that it will actually shift your reality. So that's one of the things I'm really connected to. So I've got lots and lots of stories of those miraculous healings that people have just simply because they believe. They actually have faith. I think it
Hmm.
was that beautiful phrase from Jesus, when you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains.
Hmm.
That moves my heart, that phrase, because I've watched that happen time and time again. So the actual story I was going to share with you that led on from this
Hmm.
was, so I was down in Ashland with a guy called Al, and he was an old serviceman. He'd been in the war. He'd fought in obviously some pretty torrid battles. He was a fighter pilot for the US, and he was brought down over the Pacific. And when his plane crash landed, a sub, you can think of all the worst things that could happen. Not only has he been shot down, but when he hits the water, there's a submarine that comes right beside him and they shoot shrapnel right through the plane, and he's left with all kinds of mess in his body. And he was recovered sometime later, or left for dead by those enemy forces. And he was able to get back to the US, but could never walk. So he asked to see me, in the middle of something of one of the journeys I was taking down the coast, and I was in Ashland at that time. And he said, look, Stephen, I don't know what you do, but I've heard you can do miracles and I'd love you to help me. And I said, I don't do miracles. You do miracles. And your ability to touch the consciousness of this infinite, boundless field of miracles is what actually does it. So I said, I can't promise any outcome because I'm not doing anything, but I can certainly sit with you and hold space and see what God wants or what the goddess wants. Let's see. So he lay down with me, and I'd been trained in lots of different systems: Chinese acupressure, naturopathy, shiatsu, all kinds of things. So I used a lot of energy work. I'd done years of Reiki and all sorts of other things that really did help people. So I sat for this hour, and at the hour, about the hour mark, Derek, something happened in the field. I could feel it. There was like a lightning strike that went straight through me. I can still feel it now. My hair's standing on end. A lightning strike went through me. He gave this little jolt, but he was asleep by this point and he didn't
Hmm.
wake up. So then I stayed. I thought, what is that? And I stayed with him for another hour. And then I left and he was snoring. He was out like a light. And I had no idea if anything had happened to him. So anyway, I go home. Early in the morning, about 7 o'clock, I get this call on my phone and it said, "Hello, this is the producer of California TV, some breakfast show or something like that." And I said, "Oh, how did you get my number?" And she said, "Oh, do you know a guy called Al?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "He's here in the studio dancing." I said, "What?" She said, "He's here in the studio dancing. He says you healed him." And I said, "No, no." I said, "I don't do any healing, but obviously something happened last night that must have been quite miraculous for him." And she said, "Look, would you come down and do an interview?" And I said, "Sure." So I went down. Al and I got on California TV as we call, I think they titled it Singers Who Heal the Heart. And sure enough, he was walking without a stick. And he said he couldn't believe it. He didn't know what happened. He just woke up in the morning. He said he doesn't remember anything about what happened to me. He just recalled me putting my hands on his head and then going into a deep sleep. And when he woke up in the morning, he didn't have any pain. So he
Wow.
had no idea. And he had it checked and the doctors couldn't explain it. They just said something had changed in his system. They said the whatever, had been extracted from him, the shrapnel or whatever, those wounds were still there, but there was no longer any pain that had gone. So it was very, those sort of experiences again and again with these wonderful souls speaks to the howaloo, like Joe Dispenza, that if you actually work deeply enough on something that you're committed to and you're prepared to raise your levels of consciousness to hitherto unknown levels and then trust, and then you got to let go. You got to bring the focus and the intention and then let it go. You're not trying to control the creative source energies.
That can be a hard part, is to let go or stop trying to make it happen after you've put the request in.
Exactly, exactly. That is the primary way that we keep coming back to the ego, and the ego wants to drive and say, "Okay, I've got to keep doing it. I've got to keep-" And that's okay. We all do that. But like you said, the trying, I think it was Yoda who said, try, try, there is no try, try, there is no try. I love that thing. I had the good fortune, Derek, to work with George Lucas some years ago on Star Wars, on the first Star Wars. I've had lots of, and with Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings. So I've had these look, the way
Good
it happened,
grief.
same
Your
thing.
stories.
I've got such funny stories. With George Lucas, I met him at a hamburger stand at 2 o'clock in the morning when he was on a location shoot, and I was doing a similar thing in New Zealand. And that's how come I got to work with him. It was wonderful. I just, there was just him and I. I went for a veggie burger. He was eating whatever he was eating. And I just finished filming the 100th anniversary of Rotary's 100th anniversary, and I'd been directing it and done the shoot. And so I had been doing similar things to him, and I got to this hamburger stand or this burger stand called Ferg's in Queenstown, and there was a guy there, and I thought, he looks just like George Lucas. Oh, he is George Lucas. So I just got to chat with him. There was only him, the two of us. And then he asked me what I was doing, and I told him I just finished a shoot and I was just doing this and that and the next thing. He said, "How'd you like to fly to Sydney in a couple of weeks and just work on what I'm doing in Sydney? Because I need somebody just like you." So I did for about 6 months. So
Good
it's
grief.
lovely, when you let
You,
the wind blow you.
well, yeah, if you're set up to do that, one thing I noticed that you have said in your stories a bunch is like someone will be like, "Hey, do you want to come to my house or do you want to do this thing?" And you're like, "Yeah, okay." And
Yeah.
so that should be like your t-shirt slogan or something like, "Yeah, okay, I'll go with you."
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's such a typical Kiwi. I'm originally born in New Zealand. It's a very typical because New Zealand's so small but very natural. So your relationship with the world is I'm small, but I'm very natural. So okay, I can do anything. Yeah, that'll be okay.
Well, what I think would be interesting is I don't know if there's anything because you and I have talked a little bit about that. We are building this community and we have
Mm.
a vision for it's called Starseed Village. There's some land in Guatemala that we've just gone to visit, and there's 25 amazing people already that are probably more that I didn't get to meet, but that are planning to move there, and eventually there'll be 1,000 people living there. And it's over many years the physical buildings will get built and the community will get built. And it's sort of this big unknown for me to, I've started businesses, I've had so many projects, but this is an entirely new thing. And given what you know about like the current process of the planet, of Gaia, and also maybe what you've just seen in the chart, like what are your thoughts about approaches to building a community like this? Because I know a lot of people listening and a lot of people around the world are thinking about community in new ways. So maybe I'll set that up as a framework, and you can take that the direction you want with that.
Oh, that's a fantastic opportunity. So, like you, I'm involved with lots of communities. In fact, I'm heading down to New Zealand with Raquel to look at the establishment of communities that we call constellations down there. So, when you sent me this beautiful starseed village, of course, it taps straight into the opportunities that we're all feeling. So, if you're feeling this, I've got a number of friends who are reaching out to me right now that have found land that they want to establish communities on, that are trying to open this pathway for communities of love to really collect and connect and open up on this planet. Now, in terms of Gaia's consciousness, and I'm even aware just recently there was a tremor in California in the, 7.0 magnitude earthquake that I always see as they are literally shake-ups. They are reminding us that Gaia is a living being, that she really does care about what we're doing and where our intention is for the planet. So I don't see it in any kind of negative way. I just simply say that it's bringing us to the fact that starseed villages and all the villages similar to it are absolutely necessary. Rather than dropping missiles on people, let's drop love. Rather than spending $900 billion in America on the military, why don't we spend it on the education of love and wisdom? Why don't we actually put our energy into looking after each other? So, particularly because Pluto has just entered Aquarius, and throughout all of next year, the three outer planets, Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, are going to all the other planets will move into new signs and they're going to all be aspecting, having a beautiful, let's call it a harmonic relationship with each other. Now, those three planets are generational planets. They're outer planets. So they often affect, rather than just our inner world, they're affecting the way that we relate. Now, Pluto in Aquarius is all about new ways of feeling, new ways of using technology to actually join with each other and connect to community. The power of Aquarius is always 11th house energies because Aquarius itself, if you count around, Pisces is 12, Aquarius is 11. The Aquarian power for bringing together community with Pluto just entering Aquarius means all of you listening, and Derek and myself, are all very present that we want a different world than what is happening at the moment. It doesn't mean that we're not going to go through tumult or chaos or a lot of volatility. I think that has to happen. That shakeup has to happen in order for us to realize what's important. And then you realize love and family and peace and our connections with each other are really crucial. So I've noticed just in terms of my own connections, this last year, I've had so many people reach out to me asking for advice on establishing communities. And I've been involved with establishing prayer communities. When I was just out of university, I started my first retreat center. I do retreats for people all over the world. And because I'm with people that are wanting to launch communities, Derek, just like Starseed Village, I'm very aware that you are speaking to that Pluto and Aquarius energy. Oh, I got lots of angelic light in the room. It lights up literally the room which I'm in when that happens. So they are saying, so especially if you're listening and you're a star seed or you're an angelic being or you're feeling into higher consciousness and higher dimensions, reach out to Derek, find out what Starseed community, the Starseed Village is all about. Now, what that might do is it might trigger your own desire to ground and create community around you wherever you are, or to have a connection with a community that's doing that that can inform some of the things that you're doing. So reaching out, so absolutely shower Derek with, letters or requests or emails or messages. that ask about that power of community. Starseed villages, like the constellation villages that I'm present to in the South Pacific, because I'm developing those with a group of Indonesian families, Australian families, and New Zealand families, and Singapore families. And so it's that kind of evolution. I'm very present that we're not the only ones doing it, that you're automatically part of everything that Derek and I are doing simply by listening to this and saying by reaching out, I want to be part of this, whether I'm with you physically or virtually, or whether I'm doing this in my own community. There is an enormous power on you beginning to get active wherever you are and drawing together those Pluto and Aquarius energies of new technologies, new ways of thinking, new communities, new ways of connecting, bringing that present right now and actually acting on it. I'm always a great fan of you taking very simple, tiny steps, baby steps, to create that possibility in your life. And you do that by not just listening and doing nothing, but by writing down what that inspires you to do. It might inspire you to write a song about star seeds. It might inspire you to do a beautiful piece of art about a community that you're visualizing. It might inspire you to make a vision board. It might inspire you to do lucid dreaming at night about what sort of communities you'd love to establish in your own area. So I want to thank you, Derek, for that opportunity to speak about that, because over the years I've had a lot to do with communities. I've established them. I've established 3 educational communities, a television channel, different communities in different parts around the world. And I'm very present to how rich the opportunity is in the present right now to do that globally.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Exciting times. And
Yeah.
it's cool to hear about your projects as well.
So happy that everybody listening hopefully can touch some special aspect of what I call the Chintamani stone of this conversation. The Chintamani stone is like a really precious, like the Philosopher's Stone, is a really precious moment. So if you're listening, just think back to what was your most precious moment of this conversation. Something Derek said, something I said, something we were both sharing about. And let us know, because I would love to know what really touched your heart. And thank you for touching ours, because by you listening to this, you're part of our community already. You're already part of the Starseed village in Guatemala. You're part of that as a global possibility, because it's that potential that Derek and I and everybody else is speaking to.
And if people want to reach out to you or find you, where's the best place to?
Probably the simplest is through my website, which is altairlove.com. That's it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I think that's easier if you want to. You can also, I think you'll be putting information at the bottom of this but yeah, one simple place, easy to go. So Altair, Altair, and then love, love.com. And that'll take you straight to probably the most, you can sign up for something. You can just email me. You can do whatever you feel.
Yeah. And there's a lot.
There
Great.
is. All
Well,
righty.
yeah, great to spend some time with you and we'll talk soon.
Fantastic to do the same with you. It was a great honor and a blessing, truly.
All right. Bye, Stephen.
Bye bye.